Hello, welcome to Return to Life. Today, we will listen to a story about the cracks in life where people have felt weak, full of doubt, yet kept moving forward. If you are standing between exhaustion and hope, this story may be for you.
The music pounded like a second heartbeat in the vast auditorium, thick bass rolling through the seats as bright white lights scanned the stage in long sweeping arcs. Rows of muscular bodies gleamed under the spotlight, each competitor frozen mid-pose like statues carved from bronze and sweat. The audience offered polite applause, scattered cheers, the occasional whistle, but nothing earth-shattering. Then Jake Mercer stepped onto the stage. The energy shifted immediately. Phones rose like a wave, murmurs turned to shouts, camera flashes began to strobe, and judges leaned forward without even realizing. Jake's presence had that effect. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. His posture did the talking, shoulders wide, chest high, eyes locked straight ahead. Controlled, precise. Every pose he hit landed with silent authority. Jake's return had been the quiet headline of the season. A former champion, 36 years old. Out for nearly a year following a shoulder injury that had almost cost him more than just the title. But tonight, he didn't look like a man coming back. He looked like a man reclaiming what had never stopped being his. His body was dialed in, sharp lines, full muscle bellies, vascularity that seemed unreal. There was a quiet dominance in the way he moved. He didn't overperform, he didn't need to. While the others fought for attention, Jake commanded it by simply existing. Backstage whispers had already been building all evening. Jake looks dangerous. He might take it all, easy. Now, seeing him under the lights, the murmurs felt like prophecy. He cycled through each pose without hesitation. Rear lat spread, side chest, abs and thighs. Every movement crisp, nothing rushed. When the final pose hit, the auditorium pulsed with noise. The cheers rolled like a wave, louder than anything that had come before. And when the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, the winner of tonight's competition is Jake Mercer. The room erupted. Jake lifted the trophy in one hand, head held high, not grinning like the others had. Just a quiet, knowing look, as if the victory was never in question. Flashes lit up the stage like fireworks. Hands reached up from the crowd. He nodded once, raised the trophy again, and then turned toward the edge of the stage to step down. That's when something changed. His smile faltered, not enough for the audience to notice, but enough that the cameraman in the front row instinctively lowered his lens. Jake took one step down from the platform, then his legs buckled. The trophy clattered against the metal stairs with a sharp, ringing sound. Jake dropped hard onto one knee, then slumped sideways, catching himself awkwardly before fully collapsing. For a moment, no one moved. The music was still thumping. The crowd was still clapping. It took several long seconds before the sound system cut off and gasps rose from the front rows. Is he okay? What just happened? Was that part of it? Stagehands rushed forward. A judge stood halfway up from his seat. Voices echoed, shouted instructions, urgent questions. Jake tried to push himself up but only managed to shift slightly, his hand reaching toward his chest before falling limp again. Two medics emerged from the side curtain and dropped to their knees beside him. One of them called his name. The other was already loosening the tight straps of his competition top. Jake blinked slowly, not fully present, his chest rising and falling faster than it should have. Sweat dripped down from his temples. Not the show-ready glisten of stage prep, but the kind of sweat born from stress, from something internal unraveling. He was fine a minute ago, someone said. The crowd noise filtered through from the main hall, muffled now, distant and confused. He just won, another voice said, bewildered. Jake's body trembled slightly as the medics guided him to lie flat. A third person arrived with a portable monitor, quickly attaching leads to his chest. A fourth moved the trophy aside, placing it gently on a table backstage. Momentarily forgotten, his breathing came in shallow pulls, eyes half-lidded, somewhere between consciousness and collapse. One medic whispered into a radio, another took his pulse. Elevated, she said. Fast, too fast. Jake, the first medic said, gently tapping his cheek. Can you hear me? His lips parted slightly, and a breath escaped, but he didn't respond. A stretcher was already being wheeled in. The team worked in practice silence, lifting him carefully. As they secured the straps, one of the medics paused, her brow tightening. She glanced down at his chest, just beneath the left collarbone. There was a small faint red swelling, barely noticeable under the stage lights. She stared for a beat too long before one of her colleagues nudged her. She didn't say anything, just nodded once and moved on. Jake Mercer lay unconscious beneath the stage that had just declared him a champion. The cheers had died out. The cameras had stopped. The world outside the curtain still remembered the victory. But something inside his body had already begun rewriting the story. The lights backstage were different. Harsher, fluorescent, unflattering. They buzzed faintly overhead, casting long shadows against the partition walls of the medical area. The smell of antiseptic clung to everything: gauze, gloves, metal trays. In the corner, the trophy Jake Mercer had just raised in front of hundreds sat untouched on a folding table, its polished gold surface dulled by the room's cold lighting. He was breathing, but not well. His chest rose in shallow bursts, his skin pale beneath the dark sheen of the competition spray tan. His face, once taut with focus and control, now slackened in confusion. His eyes fluttered open, then closed again, as if unsure of what was real. "Jake, stay with me," one of the medics said softly, leaning over him. He blinked slowly, eyes glassy. A muscle in his jaw twitched. He tried to speak but stopped. Even that effort seemed to drain him. Another medic pressed her fingers to the side of his neck, nodding quickly, still elevated. BP's holding, but just barely. Someone kicked a chair out of the way. Someone else radioed for an ambulance to be moved up to the back exit. The backstage team had cleared the nearby area, giving the medics space to work. The other competitors kept their distance, watching silently, some still half-dressed in posing trunks and robes, their faces caught between concern and disbelief. "He was fine 10 minutes ago," one of the judges muttered. "That routine was perfect." A few heads nodded, but no one replied, because it didn't make sense. Jake Mercer didn't collapse, he didn't falter. For years he'd been the example of mental fortitude and physical discipline. The man didn't miss workouts, he didn't get sick. He didn't let anything get in the way of competition. Until now. Jay groaned quietly, shifting on the stretcher as one of the medics loosened the front strap of his posing suit. His hand twitched again, instinctively moving toward his chest, but the medic gently guided it back down. "Let him rest," she said. "Don't fight it." A monitor beside him beeped rhythmically, keeping track of his vitals. The room felt smaller now, heavy with unsaid questions. Outside, the muffled sounds of the competition still leaked in. Applause, footsteps, scattered announcements. But none of it seemed to belong to this space anymore. The female medic who had first spotted something unusual now leaned closer again. Her eyes locked on the upper left side of Jake's chest, just below the collarbone. There it was, a slight bulge beneath the skin. Not red, not alarming in size, but firm-looking, wrong somehow. She pressed a finger next to it, then withdrew quickly. "It's not moving," she whispered, almost to herself. "What isn't?" her partner asked. She hesitated. "There's a mass. Doesn't feel subcutaneous." "He's not reacting to pressure either." Jake stirred again, his lips parting. "What happened?" "You collapsed," the first medic answered gently. "We've got you stable now. Just stay with us, all right?" His gaze drifted upward, catching on the ceiling tiles. His brow furrowed slightly, as if trying to sort through memories. His breathing came faster again. A small fan hummed in the corner. One of the crew brought in another blanket, placing it over his legs. Someone picked up the fallen trophy and placed it upright. The moment had become surreal. Celebration and emergency colliding in the same 30 minutes. Jake lay back, staring straight ahead, the realization slowly beginning to break through the haze. He wasn't all right. Something was wrong. Not just fatigue, not dehydration. This felt different. He thought about that morning. The hotel, the mirror, that tiny red bump on his chest. He had noticed it, hadn't he? Just for a moment, barely big enough to care. And yet, the female medic stood and walked to the corner, speaking quietly into her radio. Her tone had shifted, still professional, but more urgent. A few feet away, two officials from the competition whispered to each other, clearly unsure whether to be concerned, embarrassed, or legally liable. The door opened with a soft metallic click, and the EMTs entered with a stretcher, fresh uniforms and calm expressions. They'd seen collapses before, heat stroke, adrenaline crashes, sometimes worse, but as they took Jake's vitals and transferred him carefully to their gurney, one of them paused just like the medic had. He touched the side of Jake's chest, lightly, like checking for heat, then he looked up. "You notice this mass?" he asked quietly. The medic nodded. "Not superficial. Could be localized inflammation, but he didn't respond to touch." "Any recent injury?" the EMT asked Jake. Jake tried to shake his head. "No, I didn't. Nothing happened." The EMT studied him for a moment, then looked back at the medic. "We'll run vitals in the truck. Might want to prep for imaging at intake." As the team rolled Jake out, the backstage space emptied with them. The crowd didn't see, the cameras didn't follow. For a brief moment, everything that had just happened, the collapse, the panic, the confusion, seemed to vanish behind a curtain of silence. But for Jake Mercer, the silence wasn't comforting. It was terrifying. The hotel room was quiet that morning, insulated from the buzz of the city below. Soft daylight filtered through the narrow slit between blackout curtains, brushing against the edge of the bed, the small table, and the mirror above the dresser. A faint mix of scents hung in the air: spray tan, protein powder, ground coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Jake Mercer stood shirtless in front of the mirror, a towel wrapped loosely around his waist. He looked like a man sculpted from granite, each line of muscle carved and defined with near-surgical precision. This was the result of months of strict macros, grueling fasted cardio, dehydrated dryouts, and a mental tunnel vision that left no room for error. But this part, these quiet moments before the chaos, had always been his favorite. There was something meditative about it, about watching the muscle fibers shift under his skin when he rolled a shoulder, about seeing the way every cut and contour sharpened under the overhead light. It wasn't ego, it was ritual. His gym bag lay open on the bed behind him, neatly arranged, wrist wraps, posing trunks, backup trunks, tanning spray, a small tub of Vaseline, everything in its place. Predictable, controlled. He exhaled slowly through his nose and adjusted his stance, turning slightly to the left to check his side obliques. That's when he noticed it, a small red spot on his upper chest, left side just below the collarbone. He leaned in closer, squinting at the mirror. The light caught it just right, a faint rise, almost like a small pimple or an ingrown hair. It wasn't large, it wasn't angry or inflamed, just there, enough to make his hand twitch toward it. He touched it gently with his index finger. There was no pain. The area wasn't hot, maybe a little tight, maybe not, he wasn't sure. Jake frowned. Not today, he thought. He shook his head, grabbed the towel off his shoulder, and wiped away a small streak of tan that had run near his collarbone. Then he turned away from the mirror and moved on, like it hadn't happened. He didn't have time for distractions, not now. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, a string of texts lighting up the screen. "You ready to dominate? Stage calls in 90, let's get it. Today's the day, bro. Show 'em how it's done." Jake read them with half a smile. This wasn't his first show, but it had weight to it. A comeback after a year off. The whispers of whether he still had it, whether his injury had taken more than just time. He'd been quiet online. No prep updates, no gym selfies. He wanted to show, not tell. Now was the time to prove it. He sat down briefly, opened a small plastic container of prepped oatmeal and almond butter, and ate in silence. His stomach wasn't hungry, but he forced it down. Performance fuel. Measured, tracked, rehearsed. As he chewed, his thoughts flicked back to the spot. Was it from the tan? Maybe some residue, or irritation from the razors. He'd shaved twice the night before, then waxed, then applied 2 layers of tan. It wouldn't be unusual to have a skin reaction. Everyone did. It would fade. He didn't touch it again. 30 minutes later, he was dressed, black hoodie, joggers, gym slides. He moved with calm purpose, his bag slung over one shoulder. His coach had offered to meet him in the lobby, but Jake preferred heading over alone. He needed the quiet. In the elevator, he caught his reflection in the mirrored wall. His face looked tighter than usual, cheekbones sharp, jaw clenched. He hadn't slept well, but that was normal. Nobody really slept the night before a show. Nerves and diuretics didn't mix well. The elevator dinged and he stepped out into the lobby, where a few other competitors were already milling around, checking phones, sipping water from measured bottles. One of them looked up and grinned. "Jake Mercer, you look peeled, man." Jake nodded, just enough to acknowledge the compliment. "You're not looking too bad yourself," the man laughed. "Yeah, but we all know you're walking away with it." Jake offered a polite smirk, then turned toward the exit. Outside, the heat hit him fast, thick air pressing down even in the morning hours. The venue was only a few blocks away, and the walk would be good, wake the body up. He kept a steady pace, heart rate even, breaths slow and rhythmic. And still, somewhere in the back of his mind, was that spot. Not pain, not even discomfort, just awareness, a tension beneath the skin, but he didn't let it stay long. By the time he stepped backstage at the venue and checked in with the handlers, the thought had vanished again, replaced by movement, pump-up routines, smiles from other athletes, the thumping bass of the show beginning beyond the curtain. The rest of the day moved like clockwork, tan touch-ups, pump bands, calls to line up. Jake rolled his shoulders again, took a long sip of water, and looked around. Focus. Stay locked in. And in that moment, no one, not even Jake, would have guessed that something inside his body had already started to turn. The curtain peeled back just enough for Jake to catch a glimpse of the stage. It was always the same, rows of white lights cutting across the wooden floor. Judges seated behind long tables draped in black, heads slightly bowed, clipboards at the ready. The crowd was a blur beyond the footlights. He could hear them but never really see them. That was fine. The stage wasn't for them. It was for him. Jake rolled his shoulders slowly, arms relaxed at his sides, the elastic resistance bands still wrapped around his forearms. His coach gave a small nod from across the prep area. No words, just confirmation. You're ready. The bass from the sound system kicked up a notch as the MC's voice boomed through the hall. And now, competitor number 48, returning to the stage for his long-anticipated comeback, Jake Mercer. The crowd responded immediately. Cheers, applause, a few loud whoops that carried all the way backstage. Jake inhaled once through his nose, rolled his neck, and stepped forward through the curtain. The lights hit him like heat. They always did, but tonight they felt heavier somehow, thicker. He blinked into them, adjusted his stance, and then moved forward, every footfall timed, every breath measured. The floor felt solid under him, familiar. His body knew what to do before his mind told it. Years of competition had carved every pose into muscle memory. He didn't have to think, he just was. Front double biceps, quarter turn, side chest. The poses came in sequence, like music only he could hear. The crowd reacted in bursts, gasps at the detail in his legs, the size of his back, the impossible tightness of his waist. Camera flashes pulsed from the audience. Phones hovered in the air like fireflies. Jake kept his expression neutral, not blank, controlled, calculated. Every angle mattered. Every breath needed to be efficient. He didn't waste movement. What he did waste, without realizing it, was the last remaining whisper of doubt. The thought from that morning, the red spot, the tightness, the instinct to press down on something that had felt not quite right. Here, under these lights, that memory had no place. His body looked unstoppable. And yet, somewhere behind the stacked slabs of muscle, beneath the sculpted exterior, something had already begun to resist him. It wasn't dramatic. Not yet. Just a flicker. A subtle imbalance, a faint tightness in his chest that didn't belong to the movement. When he twisted into his rear lat spread, something pulled, not a pain exactly, but a hitch. A brief tug, like a cable catching. He ignored it. He shifted into the final set of poses, chest lifted, arms extended. His lats flared wide like a cobra's hood. He could hear the judges murmuring. One leaned over to whisper something to the other. That was always a good sign. He clenched harder. The veins in his forearms swelled, his legs locked into place. He pushed through the moment like always, and still, that flicker remained, a barely there drag beneath the left side of his chest. Tension, not cramp, not injury, just off. The audience didn't see it. They couldn't. And if they had, they wouldn't have known what they were looking at. Jake didn't stumble, he didn't shake, he didn't flinch, but in his mind, just for a second, something whispered, what was that? Then it passed. He held his final pose, the one he always saved for last, the signature side triceps, hip dropped, arm locked, torso twisted perfectly to highlight the stacked definition from shoulder to oblique. The crowd roared, and as he exhaled into that stance, the flicker vanished entirely. For the first time that night, he allowed himself to smile, not wide, not showy, just a quiet exhale of certainty. When the lights dimmed and the competitors filed off stage, Jake moved with confidence. The other athletes slapped him on the back. One muttered, "Dude, that was a clinic." Jake nodded in thanks, the smile still lingering as he toweled off and took a sip from his water bottle. His coach approached, hands on his hips. "You nailed it," the man said. "You good?" Jake lifted the bottle in response, feeling solid, and for the most part he was telling the truth, except that tiny nagging pulse of pressure. So faint he wasn't sure it had actually happened. He chalked it up to dehydration. Maybe a tight pump, maybe nothing. He didn't say anything more. When they called the top 5 back to the stage, Jake stood tall in the lineup. His number was the last called. The final reveal. And in first place tonight, with an overwhelming scorecard, Jake Mercer. The crowd exploded. He stepped forward, head bowed slightly, accepting the trophy with calm grace. Flashes popped. The announcer said something about legacy, about resilience. Jake barely heard it. His hand curled tightly around the metal base of the award. His lungs expanded slowly in the glare of the lights. He smiled again, holding the pose. Whatever that flicker had been, it was gone. At least, that's what he told himself. The locker room buzzed with low conversation, the adrenaline of the night beginning to bleed into exhaustion. The overhead fluorescent lights hummed softly, reflecting off the damp tile and metal lockers. Showers hissed in the distance. Someone's phone played music faintly, something with too much bass for the mood of the room. Jake sat on a wooden bench, a towel draped over his shoulders, the gold trophy resting against his gym bag on the floor. His hoodie hung open, his chest bare, still slightly sticky from the glaze used before stage. His body was calm now, the storm passed, his breathing steady, slower. The thrill of the stage had faded into a deep fatigue, not painful, just whole-body tiredness, the kind that settled in your bones. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, fingers working the laces of his shoes loose. The noise around him came in and out, snippets of laughter, friendly banter between competitors. A few congratulated him in passing. Jake nodded, muttering his thanks. It was in this moment of stillness that it returned. The feeling, at first just a vague pressure, a dull weight across his chest, not overbearing, not painful, but noticeable. Like something pressing inward, deeper than muscle, beneath the surface. Jake paused mid-motion, fingers still gripping the shoelace. He sat back slightly, lifted his chin, and exhaled. The pressure didn't increase. It didn't stab or throb. It just stayed there. Present. He reached up slowly with his right hand and touched the area just below his left collarbone. His fingertips hovered for a moment, then made contact. Still no pain. But what he felt was wrong. It didn't give under the pressure of his touch. It didn't shift like swelling or flex like muscle. The skin moved, but whatever lay beneath it did not. It felt anchored, solid, isolated. Jake frowned and pressed a little harder, testing it from different angles. Still no pain, still no give. Just that unmoving presence. Like something had planted itself inside him and decided to stay. He wiped his hand on the towel without thinking. Across the room someone called out, "Mercer, you hitting the after party?" Jake glanced over, recognizing the voice of a fellow competitor he'd shared the pump-up room with. The guy was already half-dressed in street clothes, his grin wide, the energy of victory still burning in him. Jake raised a hand in acknowledgement. "In a bit," he said, "just cooling down." "You earned it, man. Don't take too long. We're doing shots in your honor." The man laughed and disappeared through the locker room door. Jake turned back toward the mirror across from him. It hung over the row of sinks, slightly fogged from the steam of the showers. He stood up and stepped toward it, still holding the towel around his shoulders. He moved with the slow, calculated ease of a man conserving energy. At the mirror, he lifted the towel and leaned closer. The red mark from that morning hadn't grown. It hadn't changed color. It didn't look particularly threatening. Just a slightly raised area of skin, smooth and slightly glossy under the lights. If he hadn't known it was there, he might have missed it completely, but now he couldn't unsee it. He placed his fingers beside it and gently pressed inward, then traced around it in a slow circle. Same result, no reaction, no movement, no explanation. He wasn't panicking, not yet, but the unease was creeping in. Like a thread pulling tight somewhere beneath his skin, just enough to whisper, "This isn't nothing." He let the towel drop and turned back to the bench. The room felt quieter now, the buzz of conversation receding as more athletes cleared out. Jake sat again, this time slower, body heavy, mind distant. His fingers drummed on the bench for a few seconds before going still. Was it a cyst? A swollen gland? Something muscular? He'd never felt anything like it before, and that was saying something. Over the years, he'd pushed his body through every imaginable form of punishment. Torn fibers, tendon strains, dehydration headaches that made vision blur. He knew pain. He respected it. But this wasn't pain. It was stillness. unnatural stillness. Jake looked down at the trophy beside his bag. The gold shimmered slightly under the locker room lights. The moment should have felt complete. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, there was a fracture forming in the experience, hairline, but widening with each passing minute. He checked his phone, texts from teammates, photos already posted online. One from his mother, "So proud of you. You looked amazing. Call me when you can." He smiled faintly, typed back a quick heart emoji and a will do, then sat still again. His hand moved to his chest once more. The spot wasn't sore, it wasn't growing, but the feeling it left in his gut was growing. He tried to brush it away, mentally catalog it under post-show weirdness. A blip, a side effect of extreme prep. He'd be fine by morning. But the certainty wasn't there this time, and Jake Mercer had built his entire life on being certain about his body, his instincts, his limits. Now, for the first time in years, he wasn't so sure. The parking garage was quieter than Jake expected. Most of the crowd had already cleared out, voices and laughter echoing distantly near the exits. Overhead lights buzzed with a faint hum, casting a dull yellow glow on the polished concrete. His footsteps echoed as he approached his car, each one slower than the last. The trophy sat cradled in his arm, wrapped in a hoodie to keep it from clanking against the passenger seat. He opened the trunk, placed his bag inside, then carefully leaned forward to set the trophy down. As he did, the tightness in his chest pulled again, just slightly but enough to stop him mid-motion. He froze. It was the same sensation from earlier, not pain, not cramping, just resistance. Like something beneath the skin was tethered in place, refusing to move with the rest of him. Jake stayed still, one hand on the edge of the trunk, waiting for the feeling to pass. After a few seconds it did, or seemed to. He finished loading his gear, shut the trunk and got in the car. The silence inside the vehicle was immediate. The kind of silence that pressed in on you, made your thoughts louder. He adjusted his seatbelt, wincing slightly as the strap settled across his chest. The pressure wasn't sharp, but it was there, constant. A reminder. He turned the key. The engine rumbled to life. The radio came on low. He turned it off. As he pulled out of the parking spot and onto the main road, the city lights blurred through the windshield. The streets were relatively empty for a Saturday night. A few cars passed in the opposite direction, headlights flashing briefly across his face. Jake's hands rested loosely on the wheel. His posture looked relaxed, but inside his mind was anything but. Every few minutes he shifted slightly, testing his chest against the motion. The pressure remained, not increasing, not fading, just existing. And that existence was beginning to unnerve him. At a red light, he reached up and pressed the area again through his shirt. Still firm, still anchored, still unmoving. The light turned green. He drove in silence for another 10 minutes. The city gave way to suburbs, neon signs turning into quiet intersections and tree-lined streets. Street lamps flickered by in a rhythm, one after another. That's when his phone buzzed. He tapped the screen to check the notification. "Melissa, heard you won. Proud of you. You okay?" Jake stared at the message for a few seconds longer than necessary. Melissa, his ex. They hadn't spoken much in the last few months, but she still checked in after shows. Still cared. In that way you only do when you've seen someone through both triumph and failure. He didn't reply immediately. He tightened his grip on the wheel and exhaled slowly. The discomfort in his chest had shifted again, not in intensity, but in meaning. It wasn't just physical now. It had weight, a question behind it, a quiet, growing voice that whispered, "This isn't normal." At the next intersection, the sign for his neighborhood came into view. He should have turned, but he didn't. His hands moved on their own, flicking the turn signal left instead of right. He changed lanes, pulled into the left turn, and kept driving. 3 blocks later, a new sign appeared, white letters glowing under overhead lights. Emergency, 24 HR care, St. Luke's Medical Center. Jake's stomach turned, just slightly, not from fear, from recognition. He knew he was doing the right thing, and still, part of him hated it. He pulled into the parking lot, choosing a spot near the ambulance entrance. As he shifted into park, his chest gave one more subtle throb. Not pain, just a deeper kind of pressure. The kind that didn't ask anymore. It demanded. Jake stepped out of the car, took a deep breath, and walked toward the glass doors. They slid open automatically, the rush of cool, sterile air greeting him. Inside, a nurse sat behind a desk, typing quietly. She looked up as he approached, "What brings you in tonight?" she asked, voice calm but alert. Jake hesitated for a second, then said, "Something's off. My chest, pressure, and there's something under the skin that won't move." She immediately scanned him from head to toe. The way he stood, the guarded tilt of his shoulders, the way he kept one hand just slightly near his collarbone. "Any trauma? Did you fall?" "No," he said. I just competed. I felt fine. Then it started feeling wrong." She nodded and handed him a wristband. "We'll take you in now." As she led him through the double doors and into the triage hall, Jake glanced back once at the parking lot, at the trophy still sitting on the passenger seat. He had spent months chasing that win, but in this moment all that mattered was finding out what his body was trying to tell him, and why it had waited until now to scream. The examination room was cool and dimly lit, a sharp contrast to the brightness of the hospital corridors. Jake sat shirtless on the paper-covered bed, the crinkle beneath him loud in the quiet. A monitor beeped softly in the corner, and a wall-mounted blood pressure cuff hung unused to his left. Dr. Rowan Hale stepped in with calm, quiet confidence. He was in his early 50s, slim, composed, the kind of doctor who didn't speak unless it mattered. He scanned the chart in his hand as he approached. "You're Jake Mercer?" he asked without looking up. Jake nodded. "Yeah. Competition athlete, right? Bodybuilding." Dr. Hale finally looked at him. "Heard you just took first place." "Yeah," Jake said, forcing a tired smile. "Didn't think I'd be following it up with this. Let's see what's going on." The doctor set the clipboard aside and reached for a pair of gloves. He pulled them on slowly, then stepped closer, his eyes scanning Jake's upper torso with measured intent. "Where's the area of concern?" he asked. Jake raised a hand and pointed just below his left collarbone. "Here. It's not painful, it's just there, solid, doesn't move." It started this morning, but after the show, it felt heavier, tighter. Dr. Hale didn't press directly on the spot. Instead, he pressed around it, gently but firmly, mapping the surrounding area with his fingertips. His brows drew together slightly, but he didn't say anything yet. Then he leaned in closer and examined it from a different angle. Jake watched his face closely. Doctors always gave something away, even the careful ones. "You said you noticed it this morning?" Dr. Hale asked. Jake nodded. "I thought it was a pimple or a skin reaction from the spray tan. It didn't hurt. I ignored it." "Did you apply pressure? Try to pop it?" "Yeah," Jake admitted, briefly. "Didn't feel like anything significant." Dr. Hale straightened and pulled off his gloves. "All right. We're going to do a quick ultrasound. I want to get a better look beneath the skin. It'll give us more clarity than a basic physical exam." Jake didn't say much. He just nodded, the tight feeling in his chest no longer physical. It had turned to anxiety. A nurse entered with a small portable ultrasound unit, wheeling it to the side of the bed. She handed the probe to the doctor, then spread a thin line of cold gel across Jake's upper chest. Jake flinched slightly. "That's colder than I remember. Most people say that," Dr. Hale replied without smiling. He placed the probe against Jake's skin and began moving it slowly across the surface. The screen beside them flickered to life in shades of gray and black, lines shifting as the image adjusted. Jake stared at the screen, not understanding what he was looking at, but knowing enough to watch the doctor's expression instead. Dr. Hale moved the probe slightly, then froze. He adjusted the angle, zoomed in, then moved back. The silence stretched longer than Jake liked. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Dr. Hale didn't look away from the screen. "There's a mass," he said finally, "subfascial, deep within the chest wall muscle, not vascular, not cystic in the usual way." Jake's pulse quickened. "Is it cancer?" Dr. Hale shook his head once, slowly. "It doesn't present like a tumor. The boundaries are too well defined for something malignant at this stage. But it's also not a surface abscess. It's been walled off. Your body's built a kind of containment around it. Walled off. That's what happens when the body recognizes something it doesn't like. Bacteria, foreign material. It can't flush it out, so it isolates it. It builds a boundary, fibrous tissue, around the invader. That's why it feels hard. Immovable." Jake stared at the ceiling, breathing shallowly. "So what is it then?" "A deep chest wall abscess," the doctor said simply. "Most likely caused by a combination of factors: open skin exposure, bacteria entering through broken pores or tiny abrasions, immune suppression from stress, dehydration, or even use of performance enhancers, if applicable." Jake didn't react, but the comment hung there. It might have started as something incredibly small, Dr. Hale continued, but when you applied pressure, especially over a major vascular region like this, you likely forced that bacteria deeper. Your body responded by sealing it in. Jake swallowed hard. And now? Now, Dr. Hale said, finally meeting his eyes, it has nowhere else to go. Which means you're feeling pressure from the inside out. Jake stayed quiet, absorbing the words. If we leave it, Dr. Hale went on, you risk systemic infection. It could break through the boundary, spread into adjacent tissues, muscle, bone, even bloodstream. That's how sepsis starts. That collapse on stage, that was your body warning you. Jake closed his eyes for a moment. This wasn't just a weird post-show cramp, he said, almost to himself. No, Dr. Hale confirmed, it wasn't. The nurse handed him a towel to wipe off the gel. Jake did so slowly, thoughtfully. What's the next step? We'll admit you, the doctor replied. You'll need imaging to confirm the full scope, blood work to check infection levels, and a minor surgical procedure to drain the abscess. Cut it out? Not cut, incision and drainage. It's done under local or twilight anesthesia. Small incision. Guide the pus and fluid out. Clean the cavity. Place a wick or drain depending on severity. How long's the recovery? A few days, assuming there are no complications. No training for at least a couple of weeks. You'll be on antibiotics, and we'll monitor closely. Jake looked down at the floor, his hands resting in his lap. The image from the screen still burned into his mind, gray and white, but real. He had ignored it, pressed on it, flexed through it, won over it, and now it was demanding attention in a way he couldn't out-pose, out-lift, or out-discipline. All right, he said, voice steady. Let's do it. Dr. Hale nodded. You're lucky you came in when you did. Most people wait too long. Jake smiled faintly. That's kind of my thing. And then he lay back on the table as the nurse prepped his arm for and forth bright lights above. Cold air on his skin. For the first time in days, Jake Mercer wasn't in control. And that, oddly, felt like the first step toward healing. Jake lay still beneath the soft brightness of the procedure room lights, his body stripped of the sweat, tan, and spotlight of the stage. No crowd, no music, just the quiet hum of machines and the subtle clinking of metal instruments being prepared on a sterile tray nearby. He wore a loose gown now, chest exposed, the area beneath his collarbone marked with a surgical pen. A nurse prepped the skin with antiseptic, the cold wipe making him flinch slightly. It wasn't the cold, though. It was the reality settling in. His body, this machine he had built, refined, and trusted for years, was no longer following orders, and this wasn't a situation he could fix with discipline or reps. No amount of symmetry, no perfectly dialed macros, could drain what had embedded itself inside him. Dr. Hale stepped in, gloved and composed. You're going to feel a little pressure, he said, voice calm. We're using local anesthesia. You'll be awake, but you won't feel pain. Just tugging, a bit of pressure, and some odd sounds. Jake nodded, his jaw tight. Got it. You've been through worse, the doctor added with a small nod, a subtle reminder that pain wasn't new to Jake Mercer. But this pain, this silent, creeping kind, had a different weight. As the nurse injected the local anesthetic around the marked area, Jake closed his eyes and focused on his breathing. In through the nose, slow exhale through the mouth. A rhythm he'd learned during deep tissue massage, during post-leg day cramping, during posing routines that push lungs to their limit. He didn't expect surgery to feel familiar, but it did, just not in the empowering way he was used to. All right, Dr. Hale said after a pause. We're starting. Jake felt the pressure immediately. Not painful, just foreign, like someone rearranging furniture in a room he wasn't allowed to enter. The doctor made a small incision, no more than an inch long. The skin parted cleanly, and the deeper tissue beneath exposed the truth. A pocket of infection, sealed tight, resisting movement even now. As Dr. Hale probed deeper, a sudden release occurred. A gush of cloudy yellow fluids spilled onto the sterile pads. The nurse moved swiftly, absorbing the discharge, suctioning as needed. Jake didn't see it, but he could hear the shift in tone. Less tension, more control. That's what we needed to get out, Dr. Hale murmured. Encapsulated abscess, viscous, likely a mix of bacteria and dead immune cells. Your body's been fighting this for days. Jake stared at the ceiling, blinking slowly. How much was in there? More than we expected, the doctor replied. You hit it well. Jake gave a humorless laugh. Been doing that a long time. There was silence for a moment as Dr. Hale continued working. He flushed the cavity, clearing any remaining pus, then carefully inserted a small surgical wick to allow residual fluid to drain. He didn't rush. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, efficient in a way Jake respected. Your body did its best, doctor, Hale said. It tried to isolate the problem. But this kind of thing, it doesn't just go away, no matter how strong you are. Jake didn't answer right away. His throat was tight. For years he'd lived by the idea that pain was weakness leaving the body. That control was everything. That if you could push through, you should. Now, lying under hospital lights, chest open and leaking infection, he saw the flaw in that belief. Some things weren't meant to be pushed through. Some things were warnings, not tests. As Dr. Hale closed the incision with a few careful sutures, Jake felt a strange relief, not just physical, but emotional. The pressure was gone. The resistance he'd ignored for too long had been addressed. For the first time in days, his body didn't feel like it was arguing with itself. You'll feel sore for a few days, the doctor said as he peeled off his gloves. No training, no heavy movement. Antibiotics will handle what's left. Jake nodded, already knowing he wouldn't argue. You were lucky, Dr. Hale continued. Another 24 to 48 hours, and this could have ruptured inward. Once it spreads, it doesn't wait. Jake looked over. How long does it take something like this to form? Depends. Sometimes just a few days, sometimes longer. But all it takes is one opportunity, a pore, a scratch, a bit of trapped bacteria, and the right conditions. Jake exhaled slowly. I gave it all the conditions it needed. High stress, dehydration, minor trauma, all add up. Jake nodded again, then looked down at his chest. The incision was small, but the meaning behind it felt massive. A nurse helped him sit upright, handing him a clean gown and a bandage wrap. The room smelled of antiseptic and plastic. The tray of tools was already being cleaned. The moment passed quickly, but for Jake it lingered. This wasn't just a procedure, it was a reset. As he got dressed and slid into the recovery chair, he glanced at the 4 in his arm, the antibiotic drip steady and slow. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten. Morning creeping in behind blinds. He had won last night. But this was survival, and it felt even more important. The recovery room was still. Morning light crept softly through the slatted blinds, drawing long lines across the floor and the foot of the bed. Machines beeped in slow rhythm beside him, each sound an echo of something deeper. Breath, heart, time itself returning to pace. Jake sat upright, dressed in a clean t-shirt and hospital sweats, his chest wrapped in a protective bandage. His body felt lighter, not just physically, but as if something deeper had been lifted, drained, released. The pain was minimal, the soreness dull, manageable, but the awareness remained. He was no longer ignoring his body. Now he was listening. A nurse entered quietly and handed him a discharge packet, paperwork, prescriptions, instructions written in calm clinical language. She smiled politely and told him Dr. Hale would be in soon for a final check. Then she left, the door clicking shut behind her. Jake stared down at the folder in his lap. His fingers traced the top edge without opening it. A few weeks ago, he wouldn't have taken it seriously, would have skimmed the bold warnings and skipped to the part about when he could train again. Now, he read everything. Every line, every restriction, every reason. The weight of the experience hadn't faded. It had clarified, like a lens adjusting. Suddenly, what he used to blur out was in sharp focus. His phone buzzed on the side table. Melissa, you okay? Jake hesitated, then typed back, yeah, still processing, but yeah. A pause. Then another buzz. I'm glad you went in. You listening now? He smiled faintly, typing slower this time. For the first time in a long time, another pause. No reply right away. He didn't need one. The door opened again and Dr. Hale stepped in, clipboard in hand. You're healing well, he said without fanfare. No signs of lingering infection. Vitals are stable. You can go home today. Jake nodded. And the recovery? No training for 2 weeks minimum. No stretching the chest wall, no elevation above shoulder height. You'll feel good before you're actually ready. Don't be fooled. Internal healing doesn't follow your pace. Jake absorbed that like a commandment. And after that, we reassess. Gradual movement, light cardio. We'll get you cleared in phases. Jake looked down again at his wrapped chest. It's weird. I've torn muscles before, fractured a rib once. This didn't even hurt, and it almost took me out. Dr. Hale leaned against the counter. Some of the most dangerous things don't hurt until it's too late. That's why we have to listen sooner. Not when something screams, but when it whispers. Jake nodded slowly. I used to think pain was just weakness leaving the body. The doctor gave him a dry smile. That's something people say when they're scared of stopping. Jake met his eyes. Stopping felt like failure, he admitted, but pushing through this might have killed me. Dr. Hale didn't offer comfort, just truth. You don't lose by resting, he said. You lose by ignoring. Jake folded the papers and stood. His body moved slower now, more conscious, every motion checked. Not out of fear, out of respect. By the time he reached the hospital parking lot, the sun was higher, the day already warming. He climbed into the driver's seat, sat still for a moment, and exhaled. The trophy was still in the passenger seat, tucked under his hoodie. He glanced at it, then at the wristband on his arm. The contrast wasn't lost on him. One symbol of triumph, the other of surrender, and yet, both had saved him. He drove home in silence, windows cracked, letting the air roll over him. The city passed by in snapshots, buildings, trees, people starting their days. He didn't feel disconnected, the way he usually did post-show. He felt grounded, present. Back at his apartment, he placed the trophy on the shelf beside other medals and plaques. Then, after a beat of hesitation, he placed the hospital wristband beside it. A reminder that strength wasn't only found on stage, sometimes it was found in stepping off it. That afternoon, he walked to the park near his building. Just movement. Nothing intense. No headphones, no watch to track his steps. Just him, the rhythm of his body, and the breeze. Kids played nearby. A man walked past with his dog. Life moved around him as if nothing had happened. But something had. Something small, something that nearly changed everything. He found a bench and sat, letting the sun warm his skin. His fingers touched the bandage on his chest lightly, thoughtfully. It wasn't a wound he was ashamed of. It was a conversation his body had been trying to start for days, and he'd finally answered. Weeks passed. The bandage came off. The incision faded from raw red to pale pink, healing quietly, without drama. The swelling disappeared. The pressure that had once claimed space in Jake's chest was gone. But something stayed, not physical. Something else, a kind of presence, awareness, humility, clarity. He couldn't name it exactly, but he carried it with him now, everywhere he went. At first he stayed away from the gym. It wasn't out of fear, it was out of choice. He didn't miss the clang of iron or the sting of lactic acid. What he missed was movement, not the kind that chased perfection, but the kind that reminded him he was alive. So when he finally stepped through the gym doors again, it wasn't with fire in his veins or goals in his head. It was with breath, with calm, with gratitude. He picked up a light dumbbell, ridiculously light compared to his old standards, and moved through a slow curl. His arm flexed, controlled, the motion steady. He did a few reps, not counting, just feeling. And for the first time in years, Jake Mercer trained without trying to prove anything. He saw some familiar faces. A few came over to ask where he'd been. He smiled and offered vague answers, needed to slow down, or had to listen to my body. None of them asked more, but a few nodded slowly, as if they understood more than he said. Back home, Jake moved the trophy from the center of the shelf to the side. He didn't hide it. He just made space for something else. Beside it, he placed the hospital wristband, flattened it, framed it, and wrote a small note beneath in sharp black ink. Small things matter. Listen early. He looked at it every morning, not as a warning, but as a promise. He also started writing again. Just a little. Notes, thoughts, questions he'd never stopped long enough to ask before. Sometimes the words came out clean, other times messy, but he kept showing up on the page, just like he did in the mirror, and that was enough. Eventually, Melissa stopped by. They sat on the balcony and talked, not just about training or the show, but about everything that had gone unspoken for too long. About why he'd gone so hard, why he hadn't said anything sooner, why the silence had felt easier than asking for help. She didn't judge, she just listened. When she left that night, Jake didn't feel the need to fix anything between them. Some people come back to stay. Some come back to remind you of who you were and who you could still become. He was okay with either. One afternoon, as he walked past the mirror, he caught a glimpse of the scar. It had faded into his skin, barely noticeable now unless he looked closely. But he looked, he stopped, turned. faced it. His reflection wasn't sharper than it used to be, wasn't fuller or more cut, but it was more human, and somehow that looked better. He touched the scar lightly, then dropped his hand. In the quiet of his apartment, he whispered the words he wished he'd understood sooner. Some things don't make noise until it's almost too late. He wasn't talking about the abscess anymore. He was talking about life. The pressure to perform, the illusion of control, the silence we keep when we think strength means staying quiet. Jake Mercer had walked off the stage that night thinking he'd won, and in one way, he had. But the real victory didn't come with applause. It didn't shine under lights or get captured on camera. The real victory came in the days that followed, in the slow healing, in the stillness, in the choice to pay attention, because the body remembers everything, and the smallest decision, pressing on something that shouldn't be pressed, ignoring something that shouldn't be ignored, can change the entire story. But so can the decision to stop, to listen, to learn. In the end, Jake didn't return to the stage right away. Maybe he would. Maybe he wouldn't. But he returned to himself, and that was the part that mattered most.